Welcome back to Driving Success, the award-winning Fleet Advantage podcast, a show where we bring you expert insights in the latest trends in fleet management and transportation. I'm your host, Tracy Derival, and you are tuning into the final episode of our Summer of Safety micro-series. This year, we've highlighted critical safety initiatives, and now we are wrapping things up with CVSA's Brake Safety Week, which is taking place from August 23rd through the 29th of 2026. Joining me once again is Matt Wiedmeyer, who is the Senior Director of Asset Performance and Maintenance here at Fleet Advantage. Matt is back to help us break down what organizations and drivers should know heading into this year's Brake Safety Week, and more importantly, how to make brake safety a year-round priority. Let's get into the episode. Matt, welcome back to Driving Success, and thanks for joining us again to close our Summer of Safety series. Now, before we dive in, can you briefly reintroduce yourself and also tell us a little bit about your role here at Fleet Advantage?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Tracy. It's great to be back to help close out the Summer of Safety series. For those of you who have not heard previous episodes, I'm Matt Wiedmeyer, Senior Director of Asset Performance and Maintenance for Fleet Advantage. My role is really centered around helping our clients get the most out of their fleet assets from a maintenance, reliability, safety, and TCO perspective, or total cost of ownership, if you will. A big part of that is using the client's M&R data and performance data, or OBC data, to identify the risk before it becomes a roadside event, an out-of-service violation, and unplanned downtime. Brake Safety Week fits directly into that because it's one of those areas where good PMs, strong pre- and post-trip inspections, and good data can make a measurable difference.
And it's great to have you back. So let's dive into the episode. Now, as we head into Brake Safety Week, what do you think organizations should be paying most attention to this year? And why does this annual initiative continue to be so important?
Absolutely, Tracy. The biggest thing I would tell organizations is not to treat Brake Safety Week as a one-week compliance exercise. They should use it as an opportunity to evaluate how their brake program is running the other 51 weeks of the year, right? CVSA has announced Brake Safety Week for August 23rd through the 29th, and inspectors will once again be paying attention to brake drums and rotors, but fleets need to look at the entire braking system as a whole. Adjustments, linings, pads, hoses, air leaks, and with that, brake performance in general, how the unit is holding when you're trying to do a tug test. What makes this initiative so important is that brake-related violations continue to represent a significant portion of out-of-service conditions. These are safety-critical components. A brake defect isn't a maintenance problem or a CSA problem. It can directly affect the stopping performance, the safety of the driver, and everyone out on the road. The other important thing is that many brake violations are preventable. If we're doing thorough driver inspections, quality PMs, looking at maintenance trends across the fleet, we should be finding many of these issues in the shop rather than having an inspector find them out on the roadside.
Now, to touch on last year, inspectors examined more than 15,000 vehicles during Brake Safety Week, and 15.1% were placed out of service for brake-related violations. What does that number really tell us about the state of brake maintenance across the industry?
Well, truthfully, that 15.1% is very significant. Like you said, CVSA inspected over 15,000 vehicles during the 2025 event. Of that over 15,000, roughly 2,300 were placed out of service for brake-related violations. So we're talking about roughly 1 in 7 vehicles out on the road during that week were placed out of service because of a brake condition. To me, the important question isn't simply what failed, is why wasn't it identified before it reached the inspection? Last year's data is especially useful because the leading out of service category was 20% defective brakes criteria. What that means is more than 20% of the unit's brakes had an out of service condition. So if we look at it as each wheel position, there's 10 positions with 10 sets of brakes. That means 2 or more sets of brakes on that unit were defective. That tells us we need to look beyond the component failures and examine the effectiveness of the entire maintenance process. A couple of questions that we should be asking are, was the defect developing over time? Was it visible during
Right.
pre and post trip inspection for the driver? Was it documented but not repaired? That does happen on occasion. Are we seeing the same issue repeatedly across a certain unit population, a particular location, or maybe it's a third party maintenance provider that we're seeing it from? That's where fleet leaders can turn an inspection statistic into actual maintenance item.
Right. And now to touch on briefly mention about the components, I know that with this year's inspection focusing once again on drum and rotors, what should drivers and maintenance teams be paying particularly attention to when it comes to expecting these components?
Well, it starts with the drivers, honestly. It starts with a good visual inspection, knowing what you're looking for. You want to identify obvious cracks, broken or missing sections, excessive wear, signs of overheating, contamination, or anything that simply doesn't look normal. If the driver, most of your drivers aren't maintenance guys or people, I should say. They do have some maintenance experience, but they just don't know what normal looks like because they may have been seeing the same problem over and over. Now with technicians, they obviously need to go deeper. They should be checking drums and rotors against OEM specs for thickness of the material, looking closely at cracks, heat checking, scoring, abnormal wear pattern, even metal to metal contact that it may have had the brake wore down to the metal and roughed up the rotor or drum. They should also look in components around the rotor and drum simply because abnormal wear can sometimes lead to another problem in the braking system. Last year's Brake Safety Week results are good. CVSA reported 113 drum and rotor violations, including broken and rusted drums and rotors. And this isn't only about a violation. A damaged drum can reduce braking efficiency, and CVSA specifically warns that broken brake components could potentially separate from the unit while it is traveling. The goal should always be to identify that condition during a driver inspection or while the units are in the shop for a PM or further follow-up maintenance, not alongside the road during an inspection enforcement. That is the absolute worst place to be. Unfortunately, with transportation managers, this leads to late deliveries. It leads to increased costs, having to send a wrecker out to fix or pick up, for that matter.
Right. And to touch on the violations, obviously we know that the brake problems, they can lead to serious out of service violations, but our latest trust safety index data also gives us another perspective on brake safety when it comes to private fleets. So what are you seeing in the data and what should fleet leaders take away from it?
You know, I would think our trust safety index gives us an interesting perspective because the overall safety performance of the fleets analyzed is strong. We have lots of data going back a long way. But when you look underneath those top level numbers, you still find opportunities. Tires account for 50% of the vehicle maintenance analyze, and brakes all other account for another 42%. So those two categories clearly deserve attention. Takeaway for the leaders is that strong overall safety performance shouldn't create complacency. Sometimes it does. In fact, the better your operation become, the more important it is to use the data to find smaller reoccurring problems that may otherwise be overlooked. For example, don't just count brake violations, break down what type of violations you're seeing. Are there groups of units that are experiencing them? Is there a particular age or mileage range where they are increasing? Are they concentrated to a certain terminal, DC, or perhaps the maintenance provider, whether it's in house or third party? All of this information allows us to move from reactionary maintenance to preventive and possibly predictive maintenance. That's really where the data becomes valuable. If you can adjust your PM practices, improve tech training, strengthen your driver inspections, and ultimately identify risk before that becomes an out of service event, you're getting further ahead in the curve.
And on that note, I know that we have been covering this initiative for the past few years. So just moving beyond Brake Safety Week, what are some practical steps that organizations can take to make brake safety a part of their year-round maintenance and safety strategy?
Good question. I would focus on four things: inspection quality, PMs, training, and data. First, this is where you need to get transportation and safety on board with this. Make sure the drivers understand that pre and post trip inspection is an important safety tool, not simply paperwork to pencil whip, but it's also required under DOT and the FMCA regulation. Drivers need to know what they're looking for, and how to best communicate a defect clearly when found. Sometimes drivers don't want to do that because they want to get going and take off as quickly as they can. Second, make brake inspection a consistent part of a PM program. Don't wait for a driver's complaint or a roadside violation. Inspect the complete system. Establish clear repair standards so techs know when something needs attention. I'm not saying brakes aren't a part of every inspection. It's just how we should focus on the brakes at every PM or inspection, not just it looks good, we're okay. And third, continue to invest in training. Brake systems and technology continue to evolve, and now with the addition of ADAS, automatic emergency braking, all these extra things that are included in this, roll stability, so on and so forth. Brakes play an important part into that. So both drivers and techs need to understand what normal looks like, what a failure looks like, and when a unit should not be operated. Fourth, use your data. Track brake-related repairs, roadside events, DVIR defects, inspection violations, component life, and recent repairs. Look for patterns by asset, mileage, location, maintenance provider, third party, or in-house. If you see the same brake issues 3 or more times, don't repair it. Ask why it keeps happening. The best brake safety program is where the maintenance team, drivers, safety department, and leadership are all working from the same information. When that happens, Brake Safety Week becomes validation of what you're already doing. It's not that last minute scramble to get ready for an inspection to get that little sticker on your window.
Exactly. And Matt, so thank you again for joining us and helping us close out another Summer of Safety series. Obviously, your expertise and your insights are always valuable. So we hope that this conversation gives organizations a few actionable ways that they can strengthen their brake safety program. So thank you again.
Thanks, Tracy. It's been great being part of the Summer of Safety series again. If there's one message I'd like to leave fleet leaders with, is that safety and maintenance cannot be separated. Every PM, every DVIR, and every repair decision is also a safety decision. Brake Safety Week gives our industry an important opportunity to refocus on that. But the real measure of a strong maintenance program is what happens after August 29th. Are we inspecting consistently, training our people, using the data, correcting problems before the equipment leaves the facility, not just improving compliance. We're protecting drivers, improving uptime, controlling our maintenance costs, putting safer equipment on the road, and ultimately that's the end goal.
That officially wraps up our third annual Summer of Safety series. Over the past few episodes, we've covered tire safety, safe driving practices, and now brake safety, highlighting the everyday practices that can help organizations with transportation fleets keep their drivers safe, improve compliance, and reduce preventable downtime. Now, to catch our entire Summer of Safety series, please visit our YouTube channel for the videos. And for our listeners, episodes 18, 19, and 21 are available on your favorite podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple, and iHeartRadio. If you found value in today's episode, please share, like, and leave a review. Don't forget to follow us on our social media platforms such as LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and X. Until next time, let's continue to drive solutions together.